Dillian Whyte fought Ebenezer Tete on Sunday, the 15th of December, and because that was going into fight week for Fury versus Usyk 2, it meant that a lot of the attention on Dillian Whyte was really only there on the night. And then following on, it was, full steam ahead, Fury Usyk, it's the press conference, it's the weigh-in, it's the workout, all that kind of stuff. Because that was going to dominate the fight week for TalkSport, it was going to dominate it for Sky, everyone, people like me, content creators, everyone, that was going to dominate it. So we never really got a chance to really talk about Dillian Whyte in the subsequent aftermath of that Ebenezer Tete fight, which was a fun fight, I'm not going to lie. 7 rounds, it was entertaining. Ebenezer Tete, 36 years old. Yeah, so he says. There you go. 36 years old. Rough 36 years by the looks of it. But it was a fun fight. Dillian Whyte, to me, Dillian Whyte was never the quickest heavyweight in the world. And in that fight, boy, he looked even slower, which is really not good. I looked at that fight and I thought, okay, Dillian Whyte is... Look, I knew Dillian Whyte wasn't in his prime anymore. I knew that. The question would this fight show us how far gone Dillian Whyte is? And it certainly did do that. Ebenezer Tete fought Daniel Dubois 5 years ago in the Royal Albert Hall. He was smoked in a round. He looked terrible in that fight. And in this fight, he wasn't in with a sniff of winning. He looked out of shape. He was fatigued after 7 rounds. He was knackered. But he was still worryingly able to make parts of the rounds competitive and able to land on Dillian Whyte and never looked like going down. It's a bit of a worry. And that shows where Dillian Whyte's at. Dillian Whyte was a fighter who he was never really meant for great things, really, was he? He didn't have an extensive amateur background. He turned pro, fought on the small hall shows, spent 2 years out of the ring, the Jack 3D issue in 2012, came back in 2014. And Eddie Hearn was really just selling him as a guy who beat Anthony Joshua in the amateurs. He fought on a couple of matchroom shows. I think he even fought on one of Frampton's undercards when he was with the McGuigans. But he was really brought in just to, build towards that AJ fight and just be cannon fodder for AJ, or so they thought. When he fought AJ, it was a decent fight. People forget, Dillian Whyte was compromised in that fight. I believe he had a shoulder injury, and he was trained by Jonathan Banks at the time, who was the head trainer for Vladimir Klitschko. Now, this was not long after Vladimir Klitschko. In fact, I think it was only a fortnight after Vladimir Klitschko had fought Tyson Fury and lost. So you were obviously never going to be at the forefront of Jonathan Banks' attention. You were in camp with Vladimir Klitschko, you were training, but Jonathan Banks was worrying more about Tyson Fury than he was about you and Anthony Joshua. It's fair to say. The best I think we've seen Dillian Whyte was under Mark Tibbs. Mark Tibbs, a trainer I respect very highly, and I think he's very, very good. And that's really when we've seen the best of Dillian Whyte. But, in that Joshua fight, he did well. He had his moments in there. He did better than a lot of people thought, and it was a really entertaining fight. He came up short, but he had proved enough to people that people wanted to see him again. And he came back with Mark Tibbs. And, 2016 was... At the start of the year, it was a bit slow. I think he fought a no-hope. I think it was Brian Minto earlier in that year. He fought Dave Allen, actually, in Leeds. He fought Ian Lewis. And it culminated in a fight with Derek Chisora, which a lot of people feel like Chisora did do enough to win that fight. But it showed that Dillian Whyte actually, he had something. And it was kind of this time when Dillian Whyte started to come into his own. There was talk about Deontay Wilder. 2017 was a particularly poor year for Dillian Whyte because he didn't do much that year. He was meant to fight Mario Zvac in June of that year. It never happened. And then he ended up fighting on the Crawford Indongo show over in America. And he was actually originally meant to fight Michael Grant, if you remember. And there was a lot of backlash towards that fight. And he ended up fighting some obscure fighter, I think, who was like, you may as well have just let him fight Michael Grant because he fought some absolutely obscure cream puff. And I think that was it for 2017 for Dillian Whyte. He did not do much that year. He might have fought Hellenius. I think he actually did fight Hellenius, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017 on a Joshua show, but didn't do an awful lot. There was a lot of talk about Deontay Wilder, Eddie Hearn was actually trying to do that fight. And, Wilder with the offer, usually out for 2 years. We all know what happened there. But Dillian Whyte at that point was really making a name for himself. He was really starting to gain traction. Not as maybe a real threat to the Anthony Joshuas, the Deontay Wilders of the world, because Fury hadn't even come back at that point, so his name was not even in the pipeline. It was really the Joshua Wilder show, except they weren't fighting. Yeah, we know it was an interesting time to be a boxing fan in the heavyweight division, to be honest with you. The two guys there, but they weren't fighting. And Wilder was fighting the likes of Bermane Stiverne as a mandatory. Strange times, 2017, 2018. But Dillian Whyte then has his kind of coming out moment against Lucas Brown, beats the living crap out of him, knocks him out brutally. Then he finds himself on pay-per-view against Joseph Parker. Probably Eddie Hearn's best show. That card was phenomenal. That was peak Eddie Hearn, Matchroom and Sky. That was just phenomenal. That whole show from start to finish, peak Eddie Hearn with Sky, Matchroom firing on all cylinders. They had the stable. Peak Eddie Hearn was that show. Absolutely. Gets the win over Joseph Parker. Very competitive, very, very close fight. But Dillian Whyte is a pay-per-view star at that point. And he's doing good things. He's not winning these fights like against Chisora and against Parker. He's not winning these fights in spectacular fashion, but it's so entertaining. And the problem is that he was winning these fights on, blood, sweat and guts. And you can only do that for so long before it starts taking an effect. And it took an effect on him pretty quickly. 2 years later, I know he was winning the fight, but 2 years later, he was getting knocked out cold by Povetkin. He's getting hurt more in these fights. He's going down. He's being stunned. And then you start to see the tax it put on Dillian Whyte. So by the time when he fought Tyson Fury, one punch uppercut, knocked him out, damn near out cold. He's on wobbly legs when he gets up. He's going life and death with Jermaine Franklin. And now he's struggling with the likes of Ebenezer Tete. I mean, that just says it all there. So going into 2025, and again, you got to bear in mind, we don't even know what the deal is with Dillian Whyte with regards boxing in the UK. Because I look at Dillian Whyte and I think, you know what? If you're Anthony Joshua, if you're Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua, and you're looking to make one last go, you don't have the time to go and do what you did in 23, where you have 3 fights over the course of the year, gradually step up the opponents. You don't have the time. You don't have time on your side anymore. You can't do that. But you could get a confidence builder against someone who you know very well, the British public know very well. It would sell. It wouldn't probably do a stadium, or wouldn't do a stadium, but you could do it on the O2. Maybe if you want to be a bit cynical, you could put it on pay-per-view. Maybe, although I wouldn't at this point. But if you want to be a bit cynical, you probably could. There you go. Problem is, we don't know what the deal is with Dillian Whyte and the British Boxing Board of Control. He's not fought in the UK for 2 years. He's fought under the BUI, the Boxing Union of Ireland, who don't give a damn. It doesn't matter if you could have one arm, they'd license you. They don't care. And he's fought in Gibraltar under the Polish Boxing Board of Control, which we're going to call them, because I don't know what their actual full abbreviation is. But you get you see where I'm going with this. What does that mean for him now in the new year? Is he hoping to do a Conor Benn and just wait it out, and eventually the board will say, do you know what, you're in the wrong, we're not going to appeal it, you've not fought in the UK for 2 years, let's draw a line in the sand? That's a real bad way of circumventing it, by the way. If you can fight abroad, do whatever you want, and then 2 years later come back and be like, right, line in the sand. That's a real bad way of doing things. It's a real bad way of doing things. But anyhow, is that what he's hoping to do? In which case, then maybe, yeah, I would say do a Joshua fight for 2025. Ultimately, I think I know where this plan for Dillian Whyte is going. And I don't think it's heavyweight titles. I don't think it's Alexander Usyk. I don't think it's Daniel Dubois. I don't think it's any of that. I think Dillian Whyte is chasing one last payday. He wants one last payday. He wants to sail off into the sunset. I think deep down when you hear him speak, he knows that it's not there anymore. He ain't going to win a world title. He can't challenge the likes of Alexander Usyk. He can't hang with the likes of Tyson Fury even now. And he certainly can't hang with the likes of Daniel Dubois. He'd steamroll him. Daniel Dubois, Zhilei Zhang, even Moses Itauma. He's not going to hang with those guys. So one last big payday against the Joshua or against the Derek Chisora. And I think that Derek Chisora 3 is the fight that they're going to do. They're going to probably try and do it for Derek Chisora's last fight. A trilogy fight against a rival who you had great fights with. And they were both very, very good, both fights. And a fight in which is still competitive now, a fight in which actually you'd probably make Derek Chisora a favourite, because although Chisora hasn't been looking the best lately, he still has a little bit more in the tank than Dillian Whyte. He still is durable. He can still hold a reasonably good shot. He doesn't have the legs to, like, you see the way he fights now. He can't pressure like he used to. He can't work for 3 minutes of a round like he used to, but he still has enough left in the tank. And I think him against Dillian Whyte at this point now, if it's going to happen in Zimbabwe, that's the fight to make. Derek Chisora has Otto Wallin next. That's a good chance of winning that fight, to be honest with you. And if he wins that, Dillian Whyte is the only fight I think to make. Because Dillian Whyte, again, he's not going to make a run at world level. Yeah, I've seen some people in the post-fight review were saying, I thought it was a good fight. Listen, you put Johnny Fisher in with Ebenezer Tete and Johnny Fisher wins. No questions asked. Seriously, that's how poor Tete is. That's the level Dillian Whyte is at now. It's very poor level. He's not going to make a run at world level. He's not going to win any world titles. He's not going to trouble the guys in the top 10, the Parkers, the Dubois, the Zangs, the Bacolis. He's not going to trouble any of those guys. One last payday. Maybe against Joshua. Probably against Derek Chisora. And that is what I think the future holds for Dillian Whyte. I wanted to do this video the week after, but as I said, it's so busy with Fury Usyk, you can't really. That's what I think is Dillian Whyte has left. The likes of a Joshua comeback fight or close off Chisora's career. 50th trilogy in Zimbabwe. Probably make a lot of money for that fight too as well. And me personally, I'm really hoping they do find a way to do a Chisora 50th fight in Zimbabwe. Because I'd love to see boxing in Africa. Obviously, boxing does take place in Africa. I know that. There's plenty of fights over there. But big-time boxing in Africa. That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. I would say boxing is a world, it's a world, you're world ranked. It's a sport where you have world rankings, world champions. You shouldn't be limited to fighting either in Europe or the Middle East or America, or Asia. Africa, there you go. Big fights. I'd love to see it. I hope they do it. That's my thoughts on Dillian Whyte. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. And until next time, peace.